Today on the show, follow as we make a corner desk.
So this past year has been rough, I think on most people, and we have given up our office to make a classroom for our kids.
So my office is now in our spare bedroom.
And my office is now tucked away in the corner of our master bedroom.
I needed a desk that I could use for multiple purposes. I currently had a small square desk, but it didn't have a lot of surface space, and so I needed something that I could have a little bit more space where I could spread out a little more.
So watch today, we're going to step through the process of how we built this corner desk for Melissa and mounted it on the wall.
Jason designed the desk for me with Fusion 360, and that allowed us to see all the parts that we needed to cut out of this one piece of plywood. So you'll see us here marking out the areas that we wanted to cut out, and just look at the piece of wood and see what surface, the top or the bottom, we wanted to use.
This is a very simple layout technique. We used a lot of blue painter's tape to protect the plywood itself. We did not want a lot of tear out with it, so the blue painter's tape does two things for us. It not only protects the surface, but gives us a good layout line for us to draw our pencil on, something we don't have to sand off too hard later. We did a lot of techniques here where we used a yardstick to create a trammel device. That helped us to create the curves. All of this stuff was laid out by hand. We drilled one hole in the yardstick to give us a spot for it to push the pencil through, and then hammered a nail into the yardstick the appropriate distance away from it to create the appropriate radius for the curve that we wanted to cut on the surface. I'm very proud of my wife. This was her first time using a jigsaw, so you guys get to see that too. And then we just took our time, went slow, cut outside the line.
For all the pieces that we used to create my shelves underneath and the backboard for bracing, Jason then used the
table saw and cut out everything according to the cut sheet we have. So we have the right squares and rectangles to make the various shelves. We used a lot of blue tape on this. That helps us with layout lines. It helps us avoid tear out. You can see me using a couple different methods here for cutting, both table saw and the miter saw.
First, we used the belt sander to sand the edges to get us closer to the exact line of the desk. Next, we used a homemade flexible sanding strip to refine the edges of the desk.
And then all of the pieces got sanded with a random orbital sander up to 220 grit. This got them ready for final assembly and prepped them for finishing.
We used a combination of brad nails and pocket holes to assemble the desk.
We used brad nails to assemble the majority of the box, and then came back with pocket hole screws to draw that into the top. And we did this because we did not want to use brad nails coming through the top surface of the countertop. And of course we glued everything, so it was extremely strong. We came back on the gap between the two shelves and cut a couple of filler strips. These did not match the Baltic birch plywood that we used for the rest of the tabletop, but they didn't have to because they're not going to be seen. They will get stained along with the rest of the wood, but they're of a much lower quality in scraps we have laying around.
They're going to be on the underside of the.
Once the assembly of the desk was done, we took a trim router to chamfer all the edges and then used a hand sander, or just a sanding block, to ease all those edges and make sure everything was nice and smooth through touch, because we would be leaning up against this desk when it was being used.
We used a little bit of wood putty to cover up where the brad nails went in, and then we sanded that off to be smooth.
So we used a pre-stain conditioner. This evened out the wood. It alleviated any blotchiness that was going to happen. And we tested this over a couple of different samples of wood, with and without, and with a variety of different stains, just to see what the wood would look like and get a better idea of how the finished piece would look.
With the pre-stained wood conditioner, you want to apply it against the grain and then wipe it off.
We followed that up with the stain. Now, this is a little bit darker stain, and we really liked the way it brought out the grain in the wood. We worked together to apply the stain. I would wipe it on it first, and Melissa would come behind me and wipe it off to make sure it had plenty of time to soak into the grain.
We did all the complicated pieces first, so basically the bottom side of the desk with the shelves, the insides, the backs, and the bottoms. We saved the top for last because this was the final surface and the surface that we were going to be seeing. So we wanted to make sure that it would be the best that it could be.
wanted the desk to be a little bit darker. So we followed that same process of the underside of the cabinets spraying first a tinted polyurethane. This allowed us to control the darkness of the piece as we kept adding thin coats. Alright, so you can see here we started doing it with the desk vertical out back, and then brought it up on sawhorses to do the last coats on the top. This allowed us to get a really even, really smooth finish on the top that gave us an even coverage of the stain. We wanted a little bit more protection on the top surface. We did not want to darken it anymore. So we switched to a regular polyurethane, an oil-based polyurethane, and you can see here me cutting it with a mineral spirits. This is one of my favorite techniques, using a cheap syringe to accurately measure out the amount of material I'm using, so that when I mix it together I know I'm getting the exact ratio I want.
We ended up putting on 3 coats of the wipe-on poly so that the surface of my desk would be more durable.
And of course with the wipe-on poly you want to sand lightly between the coats, and this allows it to bond to the previous coats that you applied. And at this point the desk was done. So we moved inside of the house and marked out the stud locations on the wall where we wanted to mount it.
This was a 2-person job in installing this desk. So while we got it centered to the part where we wanted it on the wall, I held it in place while Jason drilled it in from below.
I used long lag screws to drive it deep into the studs because this is going to be a free floating desk.
We checked it with a level as we lag bolted it to the wall.
And then we were done. Now it's time for Melissa to clean it up and take a little bit of time decorating the room.
This was the fun part. I actually get to put all the things on top of my desk that I need for my daily use, and then I get to decorate it. So I began hanging my calendar on the wall, I installed my video lighting into the back corner, and then I just added a few extra pieces that I use on a daily basis.
This project is a wrap. It was longer than we thought to make it. It was very fun though to get it done, and now Melissa has a place to work in the front bedroom. And it's a place of her own, so aside from the kids using it as a fort,
As I'm working.
Yeah, as she's working, the desk is good to go.